So let's talk about one of the reasons why this happened, because a lot of you are wondering probably, how the fuck did this happen? Well, let me tell you, the Federalist Society. These motherfuckers have been operating openly since 1982, and they have been very successful. Here's how they got to power.
You put the wrong justices on the Supreme Court, and this country will never, ever be the same. We have to pick one that's going to be there for 40 years.
From one of the 20 judges on my list who will uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Leonard Leo is the executive vice president of the Federalist Society. He advises President Trump on judicial nominations.
The Federalist Society is about results. They see judges, along with the Republican Party, as pathways to power.
As vice president of the Federalist Society, Leonard Leo had spent years patiently working to push the country's courts to the right. In Trump, he saw a chance to accelerate that project.
Over nearly 2 decades, Leo and his allies created a network of nonprofits that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars to support campaigns in favor of conservative judicial nominees.
Their aim really was to spread the message that conservative judges need to retake the third branch of government.
In public and behind the scenes, Leo is advancing an agenda many decades in the making. The conservative legal movement has changed America's courts, and it's changing the idea that government should play a central role in American life, an idea that stretches back to the 1930s.
I pledge myself to a new deal for the American
During the New
people.
Deal, the Supreme Court.
It's so funny that like even you motherfuckers like Chief Justice John Roberts, a conservative, will be like, oh man, this institution is not supposed to be a political body. Which is, by the way, one thing that the founders 100% agreed on was the reality that the Supreme Court is not supposed to be a political body. That's the reason why they have lifelong appointments, right? Except they were wrong on a lot of shit, and they were wrong on how that would play out. But also, you still have fucking dick riders like John Roberts being like, oh, it's not supposed to be political. It's like, motherfucker, you were literally a part of the Federalist Society. Every single conservative Supreme Court justice is either a current or prior member of the Federalist Society.
Conservative anger deepened as the Supreme Court expanded the rights of women and minorities and placed new limits on public displays of religion.
In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions.
We are weeping about is the mentality which is now in America. How did this happen? But we have a mentality in America which is anti-life and anti-family and anti-God.
So those decisions really mobilized evangelical conservatives. Libertarian conservatives had already been up in arms since the New Deal and gave them a common enemy, which at that time was the Supreme Court and more broadly, the federal government.
At Yale, Harvard, and the University of Chicago, conservative students began to organize.
Our first idea was, I'll bet there are students that think like this in other law schools.
At this exact same time when like the Federalist Society was being built, not at the exact same time, maybe like 10 years, 20 years prior, neoliberalism was also taking root in a lot of these universities in America, organizing effectively at the student level in an identical capacity. Straight up, the exact same shit that they did with the Federalist Society, they did with like the economists as well. They were like, oh man, there's too many Keynesians that believe that like the New Deal is good. What we must do everything in our power to undermine this attitude. And of course, because it aligned with the interests of capital owners, they were able to gain a lot of prominence.
And it'd be interesting to invite conservative law professors to come together and hold a conference.
In 1982, the Federalist Society was born.
By the way,
the group spread quickly to other campuses.
One thing I gotta mention. Remember the Frankfurt School and how like Nazis always use like cultural Bolshevism, or rather now Republicans use like they say like the Frankfurt School. Again, another case for projection. Sure, the Frankfurt School exists, except every single campus-wide attitude that is slanted towards liberalism or socialism is unironically cultivated through grassroots means. Every single one. It's just people who are like-minded and have an empathetic worldview coming together, as opposed to every single one of these conservative organizations that were built as a reactionary counter to said momentum on college campuses were funded by capitalists. They have millions of dollars and they were able to pump fucking boatloads of funds into shit like the Federalist Society into all of these fucking campus organizations, specifically with the interest of undermining even the theoretical approach to democracy. To understand that, like, why is there no effective counter to this? Why is there no socialist counter to this? Why is there no liberal counter to this? Well, it's because, well, one, liberals suck, okay? They just suck ass. They are awful. But the reason why there's no effective counter to this is because we take it for granted. We allow people with empathetic approaches to the world and having an empathetic worldview to just continue having those attitudes, and we take that attitude for granted. We take the empathy of the youth for granted. And more importantly than that, though, there is no fucking consolidation of wealth that can very easily direct all of it to this kind of organization growing in college campuses for socialism. Every instance of socialism has to be defended and protected by grassroots momentum and grassroots mobilization, which is already incredibly difficult. And it needs to be funded by average, everyday Joes. Okay? Why don't you fund it then? Should be enough. Yes, dude. I can undermine capitalism with my level of wealth. You are so correct. Of course, you must be 12, I think, right? I can undermine the Federalist Society that is backed by multi-billionaires since 1982 just on my own, dude. Thank you.
And its founders caught the eye of President Reagan's Attorney General.
I, Edwin Meese III, do solemnly swear.
They had graduated from law school by that time and were looking for jobs, and so I was able to recruit them to work with me in the Justice Department.
Edwin Meese saw these young lawyers as the vanguard of a new conservative approach to the law.
Being an originalist means being a lawyer or a judge who is faithful to the Constitution itself, who applies it as it actually reads.
Robert Bork was the kind of judge Meese had in mind. In 1987, Reagan nominated him to the Supreme Court.
If a judge abandons intention as his guide, there is no law available to him, and he begins to legislate a social agenda for the American people.
The Bork hearings were a new front in a familiar cultural struggle, and conservatives were still losing.
In Robert Bork's America, there is no room at the inn for blacks, and no place in the Constitution for women. And in our America, there should be no seat on the Supreme Court for Robert Bork.
The Bork nomination becomes sort of a catalyzing moment for the conservatives. We need to change other institutions. We need to create a counter media. We need to create a counter elite that makes things like originalism, conservative.
Chatters will see all of this like 100-year fucking project that is also aligned with the multiple 100-year project of capitalism and building a capitalist society, and still go, hey, you as a singular individual, come on, get us out of this. Well, I'm in the process of describing how difficult it is to do organizing, because organizing on the left means true, genuine grassroots momentum. Like, I'm in the process of describing to you how difficult and how many fucking years it takes to make the country move further to the right, which is not even upending the pre-established, preordained hierarchies that exist under capitalism. So those guys are actually not even working against the current, but they're working with the current too. So there's that part of the problem as well. They're working with the current, and it's still fucking difficult to get to this point. And it still takes 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. No individual can solve systemic issues. That is not a real thing.
Legal thought acceptable and more mainstream. Because for ideas to have consequences, there was a recognition that you needed the right people with access to positions of power. And that's where Leo comes in.
Good afternoon. My name is Leonard Leo, and I am National Lawyers Division Director of the Federalist Society.
Leonard Leo joined the Federalist Society in 1991. A master networker, he also understood the ways of Washington.
In his early years, Leo's largely working as an executive of the Federalist Society, but he comes into his own during the Bush years, just as the Federalist Society is rising in stature.
As soon as he took office, President George W. Bush focused his energy on the federal courts.
George W. Bush very much sold himself as a movement conservative. And so because of that, he's able to tap into what is now a more mature Federal Society organization with a bigger.
To be fair, George W. Bush made the mistake of originally putting forward another Supreme Court justice pick, and famously, the Federalist Society was like, no, That's when they truly showed their power. That's when basically the Federalist Society decided, now is our time to strike. Now we can actually openly fucking dictate what happens.
Bigger farm team.
I'm pleased to welcome my judicial nominees to the White House. A federal judge holds a position of great influence and respect and can hold it for a lifetime.
But his most conservative nominees were blocked by Senate Democrats.
There's a realization in the administration that they need to get tougher and harness the power of outside groups, some of which Leo has helped conceive of, to fight back and to push through these nominees with tougher tactics.
The Washington Post has obtained previously unpublished emails from the Bush White House.
And this is the BH group. Oh yeah, here it is, Sean. Leonard Leo will probably know.
They show Leo's office was helping coordinate all outside coalition activity on judicial nominations and working closely with Brett Kavanaugh, then a legal advisor to the president.
As a political operative, Leo had some crucial talents. He had great contacts into the world of wealthy conservative donors, and he knew how to raise money.
When the White House needed someone to help pay for...
Man, that's crazy. It almost feels like there's no democratic equivalent to this, or rather, there's no fucking socialist equivalent to this, because you don't have socialist billionaires. That's not going to happen. You don't have socialist business owners. You don't have socialist people in positions of power under a capitalist system. That's why for every 100 fucking multiple millionaire Republican commentators and liberal commentators, you have like a fucking handful of financially successful leftist ones. I wonder how that happened.
In 2005, a group of activists working with Leo launched the nonprofit Judicial Confirmation Network, or JCN, with funding from a small group of anonymous donors.
Judge Alito is one of the most accomplished.
When President Bush nominates Samuel Alito and John Roberts in 2005 and 2006 to join the Supreme Court, JCN and other groups in this outside coalition spent $15 million in a campaign to support them.
For years, the conservative legal movement had been working to weaken campaign finance regulations with the support of corporations.
We said, let's apply that principle that a corporation is an individual or a person, just a corporate person, and apply it to the principle of speech, that they can have speech rights, spend their money to advocate certain positions.
In 2010, the Supreme Court agreed in a decision that would transform American politics.
The Supreme Court has ruled 5-4 today to allow corporations to spend money to pay for TV ads.
Connect the dots. Republicans are the party of the corporations.
Bro, Sheldon Whitehouse, like, for all the shit talking I do for the Democratic Party, this motherfucker has been a hawk upon the judiciary since, like, day fucking one. He really has been. Like, he has been consistently good when it comes to the broad powers that the judicial branch has and how it's been abused. Like, he's pretty fucking solid, as best as you can get as a liberal.
The judges are the appointees of the Republicans, and the judges just delivered for the corporations. It is being done in plain view.
So they've unleashed corporate and special interest money. It's a massive, massive political advantage. It's like giving them modern artillery as opposed to...
Except that also fundamentally, I mean, that was already ruining the Democratic Party, like corporate lobbying was already ruining the Democratic Party, and then this just kicked it into overdrive. That's it. People routinely talk about like, oh man, you know, the Democratic Party is the controlled opposition party. Like they were, certainly. But there were instances where the Democratic Party at least got certain things right because they had a bunch of key issues that they fought for, wedge issues that they fought for or fought against. After this, it's a wrap. It was not a tactical nuke on the Dems. It was a tactical nuke on everything. It was a tactical nuke on American democracy. And it certainly was a tactical nuke on the Democratic Party because they also were getting further funding from corporations in a similar capacity to the Republican Party, which then, of course, had a profound amount of influence over them as well.
Simple muskets.
After the Citizens United ruling lifts restrictions on corporate spending, Leo, his activity really picks up, and there's a proliferation of nonprofit groups that he helps run. They include a Tea Party group run by Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas.
We're going to save this country.
He became director of an anti-abortion group called Students for Life of America.
President of Students for Life, a national organization of campus pro-life groups.
Dude, this one is one of the freakiest things, dude. The Students for Life is like, oh my God.
Those are among more than 24 nonprofits that Leo advised or helped run over.
Big story in Rhode Island. Sheldon Whitehouse was a part of Whites Only Yacht Club in 2021. Yo, get it, dude. Yo, my man wants fucking yacht club. He wants to have yacht club fun. He's able to have yacht club fun as a treat. Okay, how about that?
Decade.
He wants to go to a racist yacht club, bro. Let him have fun at the racist yacht club. We're currently talking about other shit that he is doing right. Okay, let's not bring that up. Also, isn't that kind of a redundancy to say Whites Only Yacht Club? So yeah, which one is it? Is it whites only by rule or whites only by coincidence? Which one is it?
We look through financial documents and tax filings to try and get a sense for the significance and scope of these groups. From those documents, we found that between 2014 and 2017 alone, these nonprofit groups raised more than $200 million, much of it in anonymous donations.
Let's remember that in this country, the abolitionist movement, the women's suffrage movement, the American Revolution, the early labor movement, the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s were all very much fueled by very wealthy people, and oftentimes wealthy people who chose to be anonymous. I think that's not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing.
Leo had the network and the resources to push through a new generation of conservative judges.
People will watch this and be like, why don't you donate $200 million to the socialist group that you also created? Like, I don't understand. One fundamental part of this that many people are forgetting, especially because Washington Post is a capitalist enterprise and is not going to address this, is that organizations like the Federalist Society, and I can't help but repeat myself over and over again, are also not swimming against the current. They're swimming alongside the current. Remember that. That makes it fundamentally easier to build and organize around, especially with wealth consolidation and wealth accumulation at the top. Now, this doesn't mean that it's impossible, but remember that. They are not actually working against the pre-established hierarchies. They're working alongside them. They're inoffensive. That's why the New York Times has an easier time for the longest writing about fucking fascists in a whitewash perspective rather than writing about fucking socialists in that similar light. You get it? People who are inherently a threat to the pre-established order are not going to get positive coverage or promotion from said purveyors of misinformation, said institutions like the media, mainstream media in particular, legacy media, that work to normalize the worst aspects of capitalism. This is very complex thinking. It's not. It shouldn't be that complex. This is how it works. That's why the New York Times does insane propaganda. Exactly. Can you repeat that with smaller words so I can understand? Legacy media, mainstream media is constantly telling you that capitalism is good and all of the fucking things that you think are bad about capitalism, it's your fault, okay? And this administration, this institution, like the Federalist Society, is yet another organization that is also not saying capitalism is bad. They're just simply shifting your attention away from the actual issues, which is capitalism, by making you focus on, fucking abortions and shit, which play the same exact role as the media, which play the same exact role as the two-party system and the wedge issues, which is why it is promoted, it is accepted by the centers of power.
But he needed a partner in the White House.
For whatever reason, they say this could be the presidency, this next 4 years, where you'll pick more Supreme Court justices than anybody has ever had the opportunity to do. And believe me, I'll make you very proud of those justices.
Did Donald Trump know a lot about the Supreme Court? I sincerely doubt that. But he knew that by talking about the Supreme Court,
justices that I'm going to appoint will be pro-life. They will have a conservative bent.
By declaring that the Federalist Society would provide him with a list of nominees, he'd be able to galvanize the right-wing base of the Republican Party, and in doing so, get them out to vote.
In March 2016, Trump met with Leo at a D.C. law firm to discuss who he should choose as the late Antonin Scalia's replacement.
He had an idea he wanted to float, which was, what do you think of having me put out a list of people who I would pick from for the U.S. Supreme Court?
The problem is that once you give somebody the job of making and maintaining that list, you then give them an enormous amount of power. Unelected, unaccountable power.
As Leo advised Trump on filling the open seat, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell did his part to keep the seat open.
The Senate will appropriately revisit the matter after the American people finish.
With help from a $7 million media campaign by Leo's allies at JCN.
The Supreme Court has a vacancy, and your vote in November is your only voice. The American people should decide.
What started off as unlikely.
These very same people that routinely call the democratic process the tyranny of majority are also constantly fucking propagandizing falsely by claiming it's the more democratic thing to just like stop a Supreme Court appointment from happening unless it's a Republican. And then the only way that you can make sure that it's a Republican is by, you know, electing a Republican into office so they can actually do it. Like they have destroyed norms regularly when it suits their interest. And they're very successful.
Soon after the election, Leo made a trip to Trump Tower in New York. He would later take a leave of absence from the Federalist Society to join Trump's transition team.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear. The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action.
Within weeks of taking office, President Trump delivered on his vow to conservatives with a judge from Leo's list, which had grown to include 25 names.
Thank you. Today I am keeping another promise to the American people by nominating
he was so
Judge
successful.
Neil Gorsuch.
Was this the choice you advised President Trump?
I remember having a debate with some fucking random loser at the time who was like a political commentator about like how successful Donald Trump was. And this liberal who I don't even know if he's a liberal still at the time was advocating against it and saying that Donald Trump was not a successful president at all. I wonder who was right on that.
To make?
Well, my job was just to give him a list of great people and to tell him everything I could about each of them. It was ultimately his decision.
Was he on the list?
Neil Gorsuch?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What the fuck? Why is this like slowing down?
Yeah.
During the Trump era, Leo becomes more than just an activist and a fundraiser. He takes on a role as Trump's judicial advisor.
Deciding who to pick for the United States Supreme Court. And Leonard, you were fantastic, all of your work.
But he's still playing a behind-the-scenes role in campaigns to support the same judicial nominees that he's recommending.
Now, in hindsight, Trump's impact on the Supreme Court on the courts is huge. Wait, in hindsight? What do you mean? In foresight, it was also readily available to those who knew anything about politics.
To Trump.
The Washington Post and other entities are more than welcome to write stories about money and politics. But I don't engage in that conversation because, one, I'm not particularly knowledgeable about a lot of it, but secondly, because it's just not what I do. I have a very simple rule, which is I'm engaged in the battle of ideas, and I care very deeply about our Constitution and the role of courts in our society, and I don't waste my time on stories that involve money and politics, because what I care about is ideas.
Yeah, because he already fucking did it. He's like, I don't care about money and politics anymore. We already did that. That was in 2010. Keep up. We already destroyed that so that we could get like directly funded, you know, under the shroud of secrecy.
There's a reason why the Founding Fathers wrote the Federalist Papers anonymously, and it's because the power of ideas is what matters in our country.
Leo and his allies promote those ideas through their obscure, very well-funded network of nonprofits. And this is one way they do it. BH Fund gives millions of dollars to both Freedom and Opportunity and America Engaged. America Engaged.
Every part of this country is just fundamentally broken. Anyone who tells you that this is not an oligarchy is just lying to you. Let me just explain to you something, okay? Anyone that tries to tell you that dark money is not significantly impactful in the way that legislation gets done is lying to you. I don't know why the fuck they're lying to you. I don't know if they like work for MSNBC or something. I don't know if they're getting dark money funding, but especially if they're not getting that and they're doing it with the express purpose of being a contrarian, it's like the dumbest, most pathetic reason to fucking LARP for this fundamentally flawed system. We live under a corporate oligarchy. This is exactly one of the many different ways that it manifests itself.
Gives $1 million to the lobbying arm of the NRA. The NRA then announces a $1 million ad campaign targeting senators who supported gun control and pressuring them to vote for Neil Gorsuch.
Claire McCaskill talks a good game on gun rights.
I'm a Second Amendment advocate. I was raised in a hunting culture in rural Missouri.
We shouldn't be taking guns away from law-abiding citizens in this country.
Judge Neil Gorsuch. The men and women of the National Rifle Association are responsible for the content of this advertising.
Gorsuch would sail through his Senate confirmation. But Trump's next nominee would be the true test for Leo and the network he had spent years building.
Dude, even without the rape shit, which like obviously none of these fucking rich white dudes care about, the gambling debt thing is like such a classic, clear-cut like demonstration of power. It's wild.
He will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Yeah.
Over 2 years, Leo's Freedom and Opportunity gave more than $4 million to another group. And when Brett Kavanaugh was accused of sexual misconduct, the group mobilized.
Tammy Bruce is a radio show host and president of Independent Women's Voice, and she joins us tonight. So
Tammy Bruce is with us, and Tammy is the Fox News contributor, radio host. Tammy Bruce, thank you all for being here. You were shaking your head a lot during
Its
that
president, Tammy Bruce, appeared on Fox News regularly. Like other people in Leo's network, they defended Kavanaugh vigorously.
Grassroots support for Judge Kavanaugh is strong, especially...
And organized social media campaigns on Facebook and other platforms. While the campaigns are unfolding, it's nearly impossible for the public to know who's funding these efforts. And by the time the groups are required to disclose the information, the battles are usually over. The judges have taken their seats.
The nomination of Brett M. Kavanaugh of Maryland to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States is confirmed.
With Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch confirmed, conservatives now hold a majority on the nation's highest court.
We see a court that is, in traditional measurements, 5-4 and a more conservative view. That's been, would have been viewed.
Okay, but like this doesn't concern men. Why do you care so much about this? Like, bro, really woke and with no life? The way that this impacts me, by the way, and this is a question that people fucking radlibs at least ask all the time. But the way that this impacts me is because I want to live in a fucking nicer society. That's it. If you want to draw it back down to like selfish reasons, there's always a selfish, self-interested method for advocating for a better distribution of resources and also a socialist future. And that is that I just want to evolve beyond the current fucking horribly cruel way that we exist. That's easy. It's simple. You don't know how many fucking incredibly brilliant scientists you're currently losing because they are trapped inside of the cycle of poverty and violence. You don't know that. You don't know what kind of fucking awesome shit that they could create. Why wouldn't you maximize that potential? If you want to think about it selfishly, like homelessness, great example, right? Homelessness or all these charities, all these fucking nonprofits are things, institutions that should not even exist. You can't deal with homeless people on your own. That's why you want the government to deal with it. You want housing for everyone, so that homeless people are no longer on the streets. It's that simple. If you don't want to think about it from the point of humanity, think about it from a self-interested perspective. It's that simple. There is a solution for every kind of human being out there, okay? There is a way to advocate for these sorts of things for every kind of human being. Also, every issue affects every American. Raising the quality of life for one group, raise the quality of life for everyone. Exactly. You might take a hit in the housing market if you have a house, right? The value of your house might go down, but ultimately, you're living in a better fucking neighborhood now. Why are you living in a better neighborhood? Because one, now there's better affordable housing options out there. There's free housing out there. There's public housing out there. So there's no more homeless people that are, taking a shit in your front yard. Think about it like that then. If you don't want to think about it from the perspective of like the humanity of those people who are suffering, think about it. And you certainly are not going to do anything about it individually, right? Then think about it from those selfish desires of solving this problem.
Possibility back when I was in law school.
with justices.
Yeah, that's a great take. What is it? Who said this? Jay. I am somehow less interested in the weight and convolutions of Einstein's brain than in the near certainty that people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops. Yeah. True. 100%. Stephen Jay Gould is who said that.
Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh now in place, could the landmark abortion law Roe v. Wade be at risk?
The Supreme Court allowing the Trump administration's ban to restrict transgender men and women from serving in the military.
The Supreme Court has just dealt a huge blow to organized labor.
President Trump wins. The Supreme
In
Court
Trump's first 2 years, the Republican-controlled Senate has pushed through a historic number of federal
and been aborted. That's so funny. Einstein 100% would agree with that. Yes, Einstein was a socialist. For those of you who don't know, isn't it so suspicious that every single person of prominence throughout history, especially if they're a socialist, you never hear about that? Isn't that weird? I wonder why. I wonder why you never hear about the socialist perspective of MLK. I wonder why you never hear about the socialist perspective of Einstein. Well documented. Why is it that way? Why is it that so many revolutionaries, so many leaders, so many brilliant thinkers were all fucking socialists, wrote entire fucking books about socialism like Einstein did, okay? And yet you never hear about that. That's so weird. And the thing is, like, you don't even hear about it from liberals. It's almost like liberals are also completely aligned against socialism as a principle, considering that liberalism is established around the concept of private property and private ownership and the defense of enclosures, whereas socialism goes far beyond that. George Orwell is another example of this, an anarchist, but still. Ahead of the civil rights movement, we see Einstein front and center of the HBCU in the 40s. He was scrutinized for his, by his fellow peers for his participation to lecture black students from SPB Global. I mean, he also fucking literally wrote, "Why socialism is the way forward." Einstein sosyalist değildi. Yapma ya. Doğru mu diyorsun ya? Abi belki İngilizce öğrenmedin bilmiyorum ama yani o yüzden Türkçe yazıyorsun herhalde. Sosyalist değil miydi? O yüzden mi neden sosyalizm ne kadar önemli diye yazı yazdı? Yani Türkçesi nasıl translate ediliyor bilmiyorum ama yani why socialism? The Turkish guy was like, he's not actually a socialist, bro. You're wrong. It's like, yeah, so I'm dunking on him and asking him why he wrote this article called Why Socialism, which appeared in the Socialist Journal Monthly Review. Yes, George Orwell he had some anarchist tendencies. That's why I said he was an anarchist. Yes, anarchist tendencies of disruption.
Appeals court judges.
So much of what the federal courts do affects our daily lives, but is sort of not as visible. So challenges to emissions rules, challenges to the Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act. How safe is our food?
Let's drag them.
And so these are kind of real, tangible ways that the courts can either make our country safer or more equal or more just, or really thwart the attempts of political majorities at the state and federal level to do so.
And I've been very pleased, actually, of the growth of this whole movement, which I think is necessary for the benefit of the country, and particularly the benefit of people who believe in the liberty and a system of justice that is fair to all.
The problem here is not Leonard Leo. He is not a king of Republican judicial appointments. He is a fixer. He is a factotum. The interests behind him, who are anonymous, but who are paying for this exercise, that's what we need to worry about.
I was here long before this president, and I will be doing what I'm doing, God willing, long after.
Do you agree that a man doesn't have a place in Roe v. Wade? I think the only thing that men can do in this situation is advocate for a woman's right to bodily autonomy. Any other kind of fucking opinion on the matter that goes beyond that is just idiotic. It's so dumb. You just have to fight for it. That's it. Sometimes women will be annoying, okay? Women be shopping and women be chirping sometimes, okay? Even if you're doing allyship, as long as you're not stepping out of line and doing it in a weird fucking way, sometimes people will still, radfems will get mad at you. So what are you going to do? You're going to shut the fuck up because they are still the ones who are being impacted by this. You're going to shut the fuck up and you're going to be a good little fucking boy and you're going to fight for it regardless.